housing. And supportive housing comes out of the department that I work with. Mike touched on the homeless, and that program is to help with folks that are homeless or that are being evicted and do not have funds to help them resettle. Okay? Every year, there's something called the point-in-time count. Has anybody ever heard of the point-in-time count? One day every year, we're allowed to go out and find as many homeless individuals as we can and survey them. And that is how funding is determined for programs. One day. Now, that day is the third Thursday in January. So every year that I've been program director, I go out, we get 24 hours. I go out with the local police because I find it interesting, and I'll go places that they'll take me that I would never go by myself. Okay? Because a lot of times when you're going out and you're talking to people, you never want to go to some of their homes, for lack of a better word, because you're going into their space, their personal space, and you don't know what you're walking into, and a lot of them could have some mental instabilities, right? So I'm going to go out with police, and I go, usually, at the times that are not most likely anybody else is going to go. I go from midnight to 6 a.m., 6 p.m. to midnight. It's always been 10 degrees or below when I'm out, so you think about that. 10 degrees or below, and I'm going out to talk to people that do not have a place to sleep. It is cold outside. So we work with folks that do not have a place to sleep. Now, why is it so important that we want to know about these folks?
So we can help them.
So we can help them, right? Funding, raise awareness. Raise awareness. This is raising awareness, folks. Doesn't solve the problem, but it's gotten a lot of attention, right? When I go out with police and I've talked to folks, the biggest thing is they can't afford housing. Can't afford it. I've talked to lots of folks over the past several years that have jobs, have had full-time jobs. When I talk to them, they have full-time jobs, yet they can't afford a place to stay. Think about that. They have a full-time job, they can't afford a place to stay, so they are sleeping outside, and it's less than 6 degrees. And we're in school, right? All right. So, I want to talk to you about some of the things I've seen and some of the places that I've been. How many of you have ever seen something like this or somebody holding up a sign like this? Can y'all see it?
Yes, pass it down.
Hungry, homeless, hungry, need help, thank you, God bless. A lot of times we drive by. Do we pay much attention? You're shaking your head no. Sometimes we don't pay any attention. This sign belonged to a gentleman that I talked to, and he happened to be staying here. And I'm going to set these out today so you guys can look at them. This was his home, for lack of a better word, and it's under a bridge. This is his food, all set up under a bridge. He actually had a barrel, which I don't, oh, he does. He has a barrel. Was his heat source right here in his trash. So that's his heat source. And when we actually got there, we didn't think anybody was there. We just found this place, found bedding. I think this was the middle of the midnight to 6 a.m. And we're talking, we walk down there, you can see coolers, you can see clothes hanging up. and the police announced that we were there. He is sleeping under the covers in this picture, but you don't see him. So how many homeless people do you think are in your communities that we don't see? Because there's a gentleman in this picture and we don't see him. Probably. There's probably a lot of people in our communities that we don't see. A lot of people wonder, do we really have homeless in our community? We do. Sometimes we don't see them because if it doesn't affect us, we don't see them, but they're there. He talked to me. He was very nice. He was a veteran. He worked every day. He trimmed trees. His buddies that he worked with, his coworkers, they picked him up every morning on the side of the road by the bridge. They took him to work. Every afternoon, they dropped him off. And this is where he lived. Okay? Several other places. It might make you stop and question the next time you see a sign that says they're hungry and they need help. Other locations that we have seen, somebody's bed. This was the building. The bed was inside, but on the outside of the building was the chair. There was a little fire pit outside and his reading material. Now, what's very interesting is I took the police a lot of places that they didn't know about, and I just said, let's go check. And I had never done this before. And then they took me some places that I didn't know about. We found a dwelling that was just, this is someplace they took me. Someone just made a shelter, found some things and made a shelter outside, put a door in the trees. They actually had wood down here to sleep on. It was really just to get out of the elements, block some of the wind and rain and things like that. One of the places I really wanted to go, and this was one of the first years I went, so let's go to the ballparks. How many of you have local, county, city ballparks in your area? He said, we'll never find anybody at a ballpark. I said, let's just go check some of the dugouts. We'll never find anybody at a dugout. I said, humor me. Okay, we'll go. This is a grainy picture. We opened the door to an equipment room, happened to be unlocked. We checked them all. The last one we checked, the door was unlocked. This was his belongings. We actually couldn't tell if it was male or female because of their shoe size. We waited around, no one came. It was warm in here because you think about it, it's a concrete block room, had candles, clothes, food, bedding, everything. You shut the door, you light candles, it's warm in there, body heat. Pretty small room. We went back, checked several times, didn't see them. They dropped me off because my shift was over. I'd been out with them for 6 hours. They were getting ready to be off. I went back an hour later without the police, and the police were there. The guy had walked probably a good 3.5 miles from where he worked back to his dwelling. He had a full-time job. That's where he stayed. He happened to have a criminal history, so he couldn't get into housing, which is a problem. He had a criminal history. He couldn't get into shelter. Support services, it's a hard thing to use support services to get them into a shelter or some sort of place like that. So he was staying in an equipment room in a city park until he could save enough money to get somewhere. Talked to me, he was very nice, answered all my questions, but he had a full-time job and he walked about 3.5 miles from that job to stay in an equipment room. So it's very important to raise awareness in our communities. There's a lot of other pictures I have. One of the most fascinating that I will tell you, all of this little set of pictures are under a bridge. We were under interstate bridge. I will never pass under an interstate bridge that I don't look. If you pay very close attention up near the top, you can often see people's belongings. A lot of times you will find people. There are times that I'll call Mike because I'll say, I don't know what you're doing today, because very seldom would I stop by myself. Depends on where I am and what I'm doing, and sometimes I'll stop and watch somebody for a little while because I've done that before. But they're very particular about their belongings. And you can see this in this set of pictures. They're folded neatly. This person's belongings may look very different. They're very separate. They're very particular. One person had streamers that blocked off where they stayed. They didn't want anybody in their space. It is their space. And people respect that. I've had police tell me about finding a woman that had froze to death because it was so cold and she froze under the bridge. And it was an interstate bridge. Someone called and reported it. But this is one of the most telling things, and I think it is something that people should very much pay attention to. This was probably one of the first years that I went on the point in time count. January 30th, 1998. I wasn't with the agency in 1998, but I took a picture, and we use this a lot of times as backdrops in some of our presentations. By the grace of God, this will be the last time I have to sleep under a bridge. A nice day, about 50 degrees. And raising awareness is important. Mats don't solve the problem, but if we can raise awareness that we have homeless in our communities that don't have a place to sleep, and if we can give them something to sleep on for a little while until we can raise funds or help them find someplace else, you know, that's a little thing for us to do. We have stopped and talked to folks. These are transportable, like Mike said, they're waterproof. They like them because blankets get weighed down. One thing I find very interesting, and this is something I really do try to point out. I don't know, Mike might have said this, but how many bags go into one of these? Did you say that?
I did.
Between 500 and 700?
5 and 700.
Depends on how big the mat is. This right here, this little yellow, right here, is one bag. This, right here, one bag. So if you look at this mat, and you look at this bag, it gives you an indication of how many bags it takes to make one. So it takes a lot of work, but people are so appreciative because it's a little thing that we could do for someone that doesn't have much.